Hi, I am going to show you how to sew the record bag. Haven't decided what to call it yet. Hopefully by the time this video is on, I will. It's got a large zipper opening, plenty of room inside, and I opted to use a purse chain with this because I think it's a little more edgy. You can definitely do a vinyl or fabric strap as well. These chain straps are from Emmeline bags, which I love, and everything will be linked in the description box below. I just wanted to talk quickly about why I chose to do a drop-in lining for this bag. And let me just say, it is not hard. I don't do hard, okay? But in the end, I liked this result better. And I am going to take you through all the steps, all the way down to the very end. So do not be afraid. Do not fear the drop-in lining. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you. For this one, I used my faux leather in black. Let's get to it. Thank you for subscribing and smashing that like. Boom! All right, you're going to print off your PDF pattern pieces, or if you got the printed version, cut the sheets out and build your template. So right here I'm showing you what I do. Everybody might do it differently, but just get those sheets together so that your circle measures 12.5 inches in diameter. Go ahead and cut it out. I use my rotary cutter. Be mindful of where your fingers are at, as always, safety first. And then you can cut out the other template pieces as well. Right there I'm just showing you, do make sure to measure your circle so that all your pattern pieces are going to fit. Cut out the labels so that you can stay super organized and lessen the frustration. It really does help. Okay, I'm going to be cutting mine out of this faux leather, which is a vinyl. It's thin, it's easy to sew. With the vinyl from my shop, I tell you which ones need a Teflon foot and which ones don't. This one I don't need a Teflon foot, but if you're having trouble on your sewing machine, do give that Teflon foot a try. I also have a free PDF guide if you're new to sewing vinyl, or maybe if you're not new to it. Right here, I mark things off as I cut them out and as I go. Both pattern pieces for R and A are the same piece. Here I'm cutting out the lining, and I just keep stacking those pieces so that I don't get confused. Here's the fusible fleece. Everybody has different methods. You do what works best for you. Here I'm cutting out the SF101. You might be using a different woven interfacing, but these are what I use and they are tested. And right there I was just showing you that A and R are the same pattern piece. Don't get confused, that's why I made labels. This is going to show through that hole in the center for the record label, and we're going to fuse the fusible fleece to this piece, which I'm calling A for the label. Here you can see me fusing it down with my iron to the wrong side of the fabric. This will give us some stability in the exterior of the bag without having to fuse fleece to the vinyl. And by the way, if you're using fabric for your outer record instead of vinyl, it's completely fine. The method and the steps are all the same. It's written for either or. Now I'm fusing the SF101 to the wrong sides of the lining. This is R, think record R, but these are the lining pieces. I always use SF101 on my lining pieces. It just gives it more stability and it looks more professional. Here I'm fusing fleece, just showing you how I cut it out. I use the rotary cutter pretty much all the time. It just speeds the process up for me. On to D. We're taking one larger piece of fabric and subcutting it into two. So you're going to take that 17 by 4 and then subcut it into 1.75 inches. Disregard what I'm doing here. I wasn't thinking and I cut mine at 1.25. Disregard. Do what I'm telling you in the pattern. We all have our moments, right? Here I'm cutting G, and I just want to walk you through what I'm doing. This cutting mat is a little bit smaller, so I have to count things out. Do what you have to do to make it work. I always am using my labels. Then I'm going to fuse the interfacing to the wrong side. My interfacing wasn't quite long enough, so I just whatever you want to call it, frankenbatting, frankenpiece it, make it work. Here I'm interfacing the pockets. The pockets are both the same size. Keep it simple. And sometimes I interface pockets, sometimes I don't, but on this bag I felt they did need it. So here I'm attaching SF 101. If you are making the fabric strap, which is F, this is how you're going to do it. It's going to be the full length. This is just a baby one, so I can show you the steps really quick. You're going to cut your strip according to the measurements in the pattern, and then fold long edges in to meet in the center, press, and then fold again and press, okay? Open it back up to right here. Take your 1/2 inch of fusible fleece, the long strip that goes the whole length of the fabric. Again, this is just for demo. Tuck it inside there, right up to that fold crease. Fold this back over, it should be completely hidden, and press with your iron. And you're going to press all the way down the strap, little bits at a time. Let's take it over to the iron and I'll show you. I've got my fleece tucked inside, and I'm going to fold this and press. And this, because it's fusible fleece, it'll grab the cloth, and it's going to be completely covered. And sew down that open edge first, this one. Sew it all the way down without pulling on your strap at all. Let the sewing dogs pull the fabric through the machine. Sew all the way down, turn it over, and sew all the way down in the same direction again. And that'll help prevent your strap from twisting and getting all funny. Okay, again, this is F if you make a fabric strap. For this pattern, I am actually going to be using a purse chain from Emmeline. I bought this purse chain specifically for this pattern because it's just a little bit motorcycle, you know, edgy. I love it. All right, so here I am making the center creases, the quarter markings. You do whatever works for you. I'm using chalk. And we want to find the exact center of these outer R pieces. So I also fold my template in half to make my center markings, quarter markings, and then trace around the circle, and we're going to cut that out. Ignore the fact that I cut my hole after I basted these layers together. I was thinking like a quilter in a reverse applique method that you do in quilting, but we're able to cut this circle out first and then baste our layers together. Sometimes I'm just too close to it to see clearly, and that's why I love my testers. Snip into that seam allowance up to that traced line and then tuck under that newly made fringe. You can use glue or double sticky tape if you need to. I didn't use anything, I just held it with a stiletto while I sewed that down. I'll show you in a second here. Here I'm going back to show you now what we're going to do is baste these together along the outer perimeter. Remember, you'll be looking at that center hole, looking through to the fabric. So it's even better for you because you can see that you're putting the layers together correctly. So the right side of the fabric is touching the wrong side of the vinyl or the exterior R piece. Now I'm going along that inner circle to top stitch and tuck under the fringe as I'm sewing. It's really not hard, just take your time. And of course I would be using black thread, but I want you to see what I'm doing, so I'm using white thread here. Now the fun begins. You can embellish and make those record lines if you remember that from the 70s and 80s. I sure do. So I'm using my foot as a guide and just going around and around and around and making these circle stitches. Now you see my thread very clearly because I'm using white. You can decide whether you want to use black or maybe you want to use silver or gold. It's totally up to you. The white really was annoying me, so I colored over it with a Sharpie. And I actually like the effect. It's a little bit shiny and it hides those white stitches just a touch. And you still have that cool definition. Here I'm cutting out the spindle hole and I'm going to applique that right in the center with my sewing machine. Now I prefer to mark where my zipper placement is going. If you're making those quarter marks like I suggest in the pattern, you don't need to do this as much, but I just feel like I want to know exactly where the zipper is at. Okay, so we're moving on to the D-rings. Fold those short ends in to meet in the center and then press again. Slip it through the D-ring and then sew to secure it inside. I always use those long zipper tapes for my bags, so I'm just cutting it to size like it says in the pattern, and then I'm going to sew across those short ends so I don't inadvertently pull my zipper head off. Not that I've ever done that before. Now take your D pieces and take one, right sides together along that top edge, and use clips or pins to hold in place and sew. We're going to do this for both sides. You will press away from the zipper and then top stitch. Make sure your zipper is at a 17-inch length. Make sure everything is lining up correctly. Take your time to press things. Super, super important. to get a nice crisp looking bag at the end. I'm just squaring everything up, cutting off those little bits on the end, making sure my zipper works, and now we will attach the D-rings. Make sure your zipper head is out of the way and you're not touching the D-ring hardware itself when you're sewing. Now short ends together and we'll sew across those. You can see we're making the loop here, the gusset. Press those seams towards the bottom, or in other words, away from the zipper, and top stitch that down. Mark your quarter markings like it says in the pattern, and you're good to go. Matching your quarter markings and your zipper placement marks if you made them. Put the loop right sides together with your exterior R piece and work your way around. If you're having trouble here, I do have tips in the pattern for you. Either adjust your seam allowance on the loop, or you can make tiny snips into R to help it spread a bit and make these circles match, but it should match perfectly. You're going to sew all the way around with your 1/4 inch seam, taking your time. Take your clips out or your pins out as you come to them, and move all the way around the bag without pulling. Take your finger and check all those seams, make sure everything was caught really nicely, push it out, inspect. Now we're attaching the other side in exactly the same way. Don't forget you need to open your zipper a bit here. Work your way all the way around. Turn your bag right side out and take your time to really press it. Okay, on this part, press these edges really carefully with an iron, only touching your iron on the fabric. I'm kind of pushing it back. I'm not touching any vinyl. You can use a mini iron, it might be easier. I'm really pressing my finger in there, getting that seam to pop. It'll just make the bag stand and be shaped a little better if you take time to press these edges out. Especially the bottom of the bag. It wants to kind of curl in and misbehave here. Don't let it. Don't touch that iron to the vinyl directly. You're pressing the cloth. Okay, it's already sitting a lot better. Yay! Okay, we're marking the opening for eventually the zipper will sit through here once this is in the bag. So take H and place right on G exactly where I tell you to in the pattern. Secure it, and then we will mark the window. I shut off my light because I felt like it was a little too bright. I hope you can see this. The diagrams are in the pattern in case this is difficult to view for you here. Here I'm marking the 1 inch in on each short side, and then we will go sew on this rectangle. I use a short stitch length and pivot on those corners for something like this. Cut right down the center of that window and do V snips in on the short ends all the way up to the line, not through it. And then we will push it through to the other side. Now, a lot of times this is super fiddly and more difficult to do, so a lot of times I will press the seam open first and then push the fabric wrong sides together. It just seems a little easier. I'm also going to be using double stick tape here. It's a tool that helps. Use tools that help. It makes everything so much more enjoyable. So I give it a preliminary press here, you'll see me doing, and then I'm going to stick some tape here, and that'll hold it while I'm basting it in place later. Right here you can see the sticky tape that I'm using. It just helps grab the fabric and hold it in place more easily. Right here I have to unpick a stitch just so that sits flatter. Oftentimes that happens to me on these zipper window things. I just unpick one stitch and then it suddenly sits flat. So here I'm doing a long strip of double sticky tape just to hold all that back, make it my life easier. Make it easier, man. Just for extra credit, I'm also basting those edges. I have it in the pattern to baste them. I think it just helps everything go together a little bit more nicely at the end. So short ends together, you're making the loop or gusset, whatever you want to call it, and iron that open, or press that open, that seam. Make your quarter markings so that everything goes together easily at the end. I'm folding the pocket in half vertically just so I can match those center crease marks up on the lining piece and the pocket piece. So I turned my lining here. I'm trying to find the 3.5 inch mark. On this leopard print, it was really hard for me to see. So I ended up having to turn it sideways, make my line, and then check myself to make sure it was centered. Now I'm drawing the prescribed box for the zipper opening, as it says in the pattern. And everything is exactly the same as we've already done. sew on the rectangle, pivot at the corners, use a small stitch length, and then we'll cut right down the center again. And using my ruler as a guide, I cut right down the center. I'll make my V notches in the sides again, and then push the pocket fabric through to the other side. Again, this can be fiddly. So what I like to do is use that double sticky tape again. I don't put it at the very top because we need that top edge later to connect to the bottom edge. But I do put a little strip in there to just hold that open for me while I attach the zipper. Make sure the zipper pull is going in the way you want it to. Put your double sticky tape on the zipper, that zipper tape there. Double sticky tape on the zipper tape, and then arrange your zipper in that zipper opening so it's nice and flat and where you want it, and then sew it in. Your pocket is still flat on the back side. We sew first, then we'll close the pocket. I have to move my zipper pull around and get it out of the way as I'm sewing by. It's best to use a zipper foot, but for this I didn't bother. Okay, put that bottom edge of the pocket up flush with the top and then sew it closed. Remembering to move the lining out of the way as you're sewing that closed. Really important. Then we're going to sew the sides, and see how I folded that lining out of the way? You're not sewing it to the lining. Pull it away and then sew the side of the pocket closed. It's that easy. And there you have it. You have your zipper pocket all finished. Let's move on to the slip-in pocket, which is piece K. Again, folding it, we're going to sew down the sides. Leave some of the bottom open for turning right sides out. Make sure to get up in there and push those corners out really nicely. Take your time with that. Then tuck the bottom edge in. I'm trying to get a close-up here for you. I tuck it in, press it, make sure it's straight and even across the top. And then I'm going to sew it closed and then sew another line 1/4 inch away from the first. And that becomes the top of the pocket. Now here you can see I was struggling with this print on making things even and straight and flat, so I had to kind of do this over again. Take your time. Pocket first so it's not going to shift and tilt, and then sew the sides. Then I fold the whole thing to find the exact center, and I sew from the bottom of the pocket up toward the top to divide the pocket into two. Remember to lock stitch, back stitch those top corner pieces. They get a lot of stress during pocket use. Match that bottom seam of your loop to the bottom of the circle. Match all the quarter markings you've already made as instructed in the pattern, and ease everything around. Again, take your time. If this is your first time making a circle bag, it might take you a little bit of adjusting here, and that's fine. Don't be too hard on yourself. I sew this kind of slowly on the sewing machine, removing clips as I come to them. And then I just check the seam and make sure everything is good. Make sure you're attaching the other side in the same way and that the top is at the top Your pocket's not upside down, all of that good stuff that we've all done before. So now we've got a lining bag and an outer bag. Tuck that lining right into the exterior. Push it all down in every crevice and quarter, and take your time to match these edges. Take your time. That's the biggest thing here. I just want you to see that those edges line up nicely. Bring that lining all the way up to the teeth, but not over the teeth. You want your zipper to work. Push everything down, make it fit. The lining should be nice and snug inside there. I use tons of clips. I'm not going to play around. I'm going to use those clips. Okay, so we're on the last step pretty much. Make sure to push everything out really nicely. That's why it's so important on the step before this to press all these seams out, because if you don't, it'll seem like your lining is too baggy. But once you press it all out, it's going to fit in there super snug. It's really awesome. So there are two ways we can finish this up. If you can, and if your machine throat allows it, because we matched this up here, you can put on a zipper foot and sew along the zipper teeth edge, not over the teeth, but right beside them to catch that lining, okay? I go from one side to the other, so I would use a black thread so that you don't see it, and sew all the way down and stop on this end. And then down here, I can just barely, I pull my zipper up a bit, okay, so it's out of the way, and I can just barely sew across here on my other machine, which has a skinnier throat. And then I sew all the way down this edge, right close to the teeth, not touching the zipper teeth, and I'm catching the lining and this all at once, and then again take it out and then sew across the short edge to catch that inner piece here. And that covers all the edges and it's done, okay? It is faster that way, but if you have a machine that is harder to work with, as far as fitting a bag over the throat as you're sewing, if you know what I mean, then it can be troublesome, okay? So there's another way that I'm going to show you right here, and that's by hand. And it's so much simpler than what I gave it credit for when I went into designing this bag. I flip everything out. Actually, we can just turn the whole bag out if you want to, but I don't think we have to. So why do it if you don't have to? This is how I sit with it. And I turn on a Netflix show, and we're going to catch this by hand as we're sewing. Let me get my needle. Oh, here's a needle. I just thread it with, actually I'm going to use Gutermann thread because cotton thread tends to break for me. So I like to use an all-purpose poly blend like Gutermann, all-purpose for bags. You don't want your thread too long. You want it just, you know, you're going to have to rethread your needle a couple of times, but that's not a big deal, especially just put on a show or a podcast or an audiobook and enjoy the process. It's not a race. You're going to have such a cool bag at the end of this. It'll be unique to you. Nobody else in the world is going to have one like this. Okay, so I'm going to take these two clips off so I can work. a little better. And I'm going to start in here so that my knot is hidden inside the lining, okay? So I'm just going to push that knot down in between the layers. And now I can bring my thread up and I'm going to catch some of the lining and then take a teeny tiny bite of that zipper tape and then bring it back through the lining. I should be using a black thread, but I'm using white for right now so you can kind of see. Now see, you will see that little stitch there, but you know what I do? I Sharpie over it. And you cannot see it anymore. But most of our stitches will be so small, even if it doesn't match, it's not terrible. Now, take a little bite out of both layers. And then oops, I pulled it out. Don't do that. Come back up. I should really have on a thimble because my fingers are sore from doing so much stitching the other day. There's another little bite that I'm going to Sharpie. Now you can push your needle just into the lining if you want and scooch down the line further, but I find that since I am going to be using this bag, I rather just take lots of stitches and have it be really, really strong. And because this has interfacing, which I wanted it to so it's nice and crisp, it is harder to get your needle through, but just use a really sharp one. All needles are not created the same. Find what works for you the best. For me, I think this one, what works for me are these Chanel John James needles. They are super sharp. And I found it was a lot easier. I'm going to put my needle just in the lining material and scooch down the line just a bit. I'm just scooching down about an inch. And then I'm going to take another bite. You can see why machining this would be faster, right? But both ways are easy. Don't let your mind play tricks on you. Okay, I'm putting it just in the lining and I'm going to scooch down half an inch and come out. And then I'm going to take another bite through all layers. There's the zipper tape and come back up. And it's being connected, so I'm just going to shut up and keep sewing. Do you want me to sing to you while you stitch? I know, I'm so good at it. I should sing in every pattern, don't you think? I know, or you could hear my pug snore. Do you want to hear my pug snore? Do I sound like I'm on Broadway? Tori, can you snore on demand? Sniffing is not snoring. Down here, I take extra stitches back and forth to really reinforce these short ends. Okay, so now here we go back up the other side. And I mean, I'm not even I think I'm 10 minutes into a podcast right now. It's nothing. I don't know why I thought it would be so hard. It just goes to show, man, sometimes you just got to do it to have your mind expanded. So I was over it by this point and forgot to record me pressing this bag like it's, what's the saying? No tomorrow? Press that baby nugget so it doesn't look like a poofy tire, because we're going for a record and you want it to be like a record, right? Sharpie over your threads, do whatever you have to do to make it super hot, super fly, add your purse chain, and you're ready to work. Work it, girl. Come on over here. Work it, girl, yeah. Thank you for putting up with me this long. And thank you for subscribing. I'll see y'all later. Bye.